Hello everyone, this is Sunny from Bottom Split Podium, and I'm here with a short video. This is just going to be a talking video where I'm going to discuss the alleged new Logitech wheel that's coming out. So I noticed a post on Reddit on the sim racing subreddit about Logitech just posted this on Instagram, Master the Circuit, and it's apparently a Logitech ad featuring Fernando Alonso, who's a famous Formula One driver who's been really popular in sim racing recently. And the speculation is that it's a new Logitech wheel, and this is somewhat backed up by another Reddit post that came out before Logitech G923, new wheel from Logitech that somebody posted. Now, I did a little bit of research, and one of the things I'm going to say is that you should probably wait if you were considering buying a G29 or a G920 now or within the next week or so. I think it's a good idea for you to wait. There's a couple of reasons for that, but before I get into that, I'd like to say that my general assumption, and this could be wrong, these things, assumptions, they could end up being true, they could end up being false, and that's one of the things about talking about hardware that hasn't come out yet. It's important to keep an open mind, but let's assume the worst case scenario and the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, the wheel comes out and it's basically exactly the same as the previous Logitech wheels. The force feedback is the same, and like all of the software and more or less the experience of it is the same. Even in that worst case scenario, the G29 and the G920, they could possibly drop in price because there's a newer SKU, and the newer SKU is of course going to be most likely the exact same manufacturer's suggested retail price as the older SKU. So you can use that as an argument if you were considering buying a G920 off of someone in the secondhand market. Why would you pay the same price for the older version, right? So the other possibility is that the older SKUs are going to be discontinued, or they're going to go on clearance. So you might be able to get them cheaper from retailers like Amazon or Best Buy or something like that. But let's assume the best case scenario. Let's say that the wheel is actually something new. It actually has a new force feedback system. Most likely that's not true, but if it is true, you could pay the same price and get a much better experience. So there's basically no sort of consequence to waiting. There is an exception. If you've come across a really great deal on a beginner wheel like a G29 or a G920, something like under $200, for example, I would just go ahead and buy it because I'm assuming that it's going to be basically the same wheel. But with how expensive wheels are going for right now, there's really no negative side to picking up a wheel if you can get one for a good price. But let's move into why I'm making the assumption that the wheel is going to be the same. So in the earlier Logitech post, someone linked some images that was posted on, I believe, Facebook. I can't remember where, but there was an ad that they found, and it had a few images of this supposed new product. And so it says G923 True Force. And if you translate what these words are for the picture of the force feedback system, it basically says that it has like the new generation of force feedback. But if you look deeply at the image, you'll see that it has this sort of servo motor that's attached to a large gear, and the large gear turns the wheel. Now, if you look at the Logitech G29 or the G920 product page, you'll see that they have an image of their force feedback system, and it more or less looks exactly the same. It's got a servo motor that's attached to a large gear, and the large gear rotates, which spins the actual wheel itself. So this is kind of evidence that the force feedback system is most likely the same. That's my assumption anyway, is that the force feedback system is exactly the same. So I'm going to guess that it's the same because they've done this through 3 generations of wheels so far. The G27 had pretty much the same force feedback system as the G25, and the G29 and G920 had pretty much the same force feedback system as the G27. There were a few minor changes with the buttons and the shifter being included or not, but for the most part, the wheel was very similar. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In my opinion, I feel that it would be really awesome if Logitech made a belt-driven wheel, but there's actually a lot of evidence that belt-driven wheels have reliability issues. The belts could they could wear out over time and become loose. They could snap. So basically, all of the belt-driven wheels that are in the market right now, there hasn't been a very, very reliable belt-driven wheel. There's people complaining about Thrustmaster belt-driven wheels, and there's people complaining about Fanatic belt-driven wheels breaking or having issues later on in their lifeline. And honestly, Logitech is kind of seen as one of the most reliable manufacturers out of all like the sim racing hardware. I believe that reliability it's kind of like an upside down bell curve. So on like the really really low end, you have the Logitech G29 and the G920, which are gear driven wheels with a very very weak servo motor driving their force feedback. And then all along the middle range, you have all these belt driven wheels, and the reliability kind of drops a bit. You have a lot of people complaining about belt driven wheels breaking or having issues later on in their lifetime. But then on the other end, the more expensive wheels, you have industrial grade direct drive motors using like industrial grade servo motors. And since those are industrial grade components, their reliability tends to be pretty strong. There's very few people that have direct drive wheels that sort of like fail like out of nowhere. So I feel that maybe that's the reason why Logitech is kind of staying away from these higher end wheels because the reliability just isn't there. And I think that reliability is something that Logitech kind of takes very seriously. In 20 years of computing, I've never had a Logitech product fail on me. And the other reason why I think it's not necessarily a bad thing is because if you're just starting out and you're just getting your first wheel, the G29 and the G920 are strong enough, I think, for you to get a feel for sim racing and to get an understanding of like whether or not you're going to enjoy the hobby or not. The G29, it's kind of no frills, but what it lacks in excitement, it makes up for in sort of like predictable reliability and stability. I've never heard of anybody having a Logitech wheel kind of fail drastically. So I think it's still a good wheel to start out with. But waiting offers a lot of advantages because if the wheel ends up being better and I end up being wrong, you get like a really great wheel. But if it ends up being the exact same wheel as before, I think that's not a bad thing either because it's still a really great starter wheel. But it just means that you can probably get the G920 for a much cheaper price. And going back to that G29 versus G920, the last thing I'll talk about is console compatibility. A lot of people think that this wheel might be compatible with PlayStation and Xbox. Um, I think that there's a very, very small chance that that's actually going to be true. I did a little bit of digging and I found this website called Factory Outlet Store, and it's not a real Logitech store, of course, but it's a one of those product sites that does like data mining of product information from manufacturers, and they already pulled up like the technical features for this wheel, and it says that it's compatible with the Xbox One console and PC, but it doesn't say that it's compatible with a PlayStation. So I think if this were compatible with PlayStation, a lot of these websites that sort of just pull the product information from servers, they might say PlayStation somewhere in the title of the product itself. But if you search for the SKU right here on the product page, it's pretty obvious that this is the SKU for the new wheel. And when you search for that SKU, you don't see any sort of PlayStation information anywhere. So yeah, my assumption is that it's only compatible with Xbox and PlayStation. But like I said, with my assumptions, it could be wrong and I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, that's great because that means that we get like a new wheel from Logitech with a new force feedback system and it's compatible with PlayStation and Xbox. But if I'm not wrong, you didn't get your hopes up and you don't get like disappointed with like expectations that go beyond what it is. So that's my advice. The last thing I'm going to say is if you were not in the market for a Logitech wheel at all, then maybe it's not a bad idea to go ahead and buy whatever wheel that you were intending to buy. I don't think there's a new Thrustmaster wheel coming out, but Thrustmaster doesn't really leak information that much. So if it is, I'm going to assume that Thrustmaster's wheel is not going to come out until later in the year, sort of like a reaction to this new wheel by Logitech. And I'm also going to assume that a new PlayStation version is not going to come out until maybe near the PlayStation's release because Sony, like Fnatic has said that Sony hasn't given them any information yet about PlayStation 5 backwards compatibility with PlayStation 4 accessories. So I'm going to guess that Logitech is kind of in that same sort of area where they don't know what they're going to do in terms of PlayStation compatibility. So I'm going to guess that if there's a new PlayStation wheel from Logitech, it's not going to come out until maybe later in the year. But good luck. If you have any questions about a beginner wheel that you're considering, please drop me a comment below. Let me know if you have any questions. I still think the Logitech wheels are great starter wheels, but I think it's a good idea to wait because you just want to find out what this wheel is before you make a decision. You don't want to buy a wheel right now and then find out that there was a new version that came out and then you just have regret. I think that the worst thing you can do is buy something a few days before a new product comes out, and then you just have regret. Like I would totally regret it if I bought a G29 or a G920 right now, and then I found out that the new wheel came out later. But I'll see you guys next time. I'll make another video with actual racing content later, but sorry that this was just pretty dry. Yeah, see you guys. Stay safe.